Archbishop McCarthy. Today I will be informing you on the latest news, the First Crusade. For those of you who have never heard of the Crusades, let me explain to you the overall structure and what a crusade really is. A crusade is a conflict, and this conflict can more specifically be called a war. These wars are a result of the Christians and Muslims trying to gain control over a holy city or a holy place. This war takes place because both believe they have the reason to own that holy place, as it is very holy in each and every one of their belief and religion. The Crusades started in 1096 and have gone on since.
The crusade was just not any conflict. According to Life Science, there are several key factors that help historians to define crusading campaigns. In quote, in order to be considered an actual crusade, the campaign had to be endorsed by the Pope. In addition, a true crusader took a crusading vow and then sewed a cross onto their clothing to symbolize their commitment. So don't worry about having to keep track of hundreds of wars and conflicts. Only those that follow these guidelines truly are considered crusades.
Right at the start of the First Crusade, some major events already took place. In 1906, about 4,000 knights and 25,000 infantry began to travel to the east side, where they were led by Raymond of Toulouse, Godfrey of Bouillon, Robert of Flanders, and Mohammed of Otranto. Finally, by 1097, the knights were able to cross into Asia Minor. By June, the Crusaders were able to capture the city of Nicaea and defeat an army of Seljuk Turks at Doryleon. On June 3rd, 1098, one of the leaders, Mohammed, was able to persuade a Turkish trader to open Antioch's bridge gate, allowing the knights to pour into the city. After much death and time passing, a large Turkish army arrived to attempt to regain the city, but they were too defeated and the Antioch citadel surrendered to the Europeans. Moving on to the next major event of this First Crusade, the Crusaders were finally ready for their ultimate goal, to conquer Jerusalem. In December of 1098, the Crusaders began their march, and by June 7, 1099, they reached their ultimate destination. By the time of their arrival, they were left with only around 1,300 knights and 12,500 infantry. With the help of Genoa's ships, the Crusaders were able to build siege towers, catapults, and a battering ram. Around mid-July, Godfrey of Bouillon made the decision to attack a section of the wall. With his leadership, the attackers scaled the defense and found themselves inside the city on 15th of July, 1099. After a mass slaughtering of Muslims and Jews, Jerusalem was finally in the hands of Christians. Godfrey of Bouillon was crowned King of Jerusalem.
Interviewing Peter. Peter, how did you lead the First Crusade? I was preaching throughout France and Germany. I also led peasants in the crusade, which is why the crusade became known as the Crusade of Poor People. How did you make an impact on the people who followed you throughout the journey to the Holy Land, Peter? I preached the whole way there. Many of the people who followed me were laborers, tradesmen, and peasants. Last question. What kind of assistance from the Byzantine Empire did you need? I asked for assistance because I was an inexperienced leader and I had trouble maintaining discipline among this unruly troops. I returned to Constantinople and I sought help. Many negative aspects happened on this journey, and seeing my men get slaughtered made me feel unbearably broken. But I couldn't stop here. I knew I had to go to Jerusalem and bring more people to God before Jerusalem got captured. Thank you, Peter, for all your time and words.
Interviewing Pope Urban. Please explain the First Crusade. Well, initially, this was the first Christian reconquest of the sacred city of Jerusalem and the Holy Land, and the freeing of the Eastern Christians from Muslims' rule. It began on November 27, 1095, and this began when the Byzantine Emperor sought me out to help repel the invading Turks of Anatolia. Our goal was to recapture Jerusalem. So, what was your first objective? Well, our first objective was Nicaea, which was previously under Byzantine rule. My crusaders then captured it in June 18, 1097, by defeating the Arslan troops. Tell me more about what your journey consisted of. We marched through the Mediterranean region, and this was when we arrived in Jerusalem and we launched an attack on the city. How many trials did you have before you were able to actually recapture the city? There were 2 trials. Our first was a fail because we lacked food, water, and supplies, and we lost so many men. Our other initial attempt failed because we organized and because we organized a meeting to discuss how we'd actually attack and be successful. On June 17th, a party of mariners under the Embarcacio arrived and provided the Crusaders with skilled engineers and perhaps more supplies of timber, which could help build many things. This was a help, and we had one more assault on July 15th. This was when we launched at both ends of the city and the Crusaders were able to enter. Thank you, Pope Urban.
Let's head over to Western Europe.
Thank you. Here we are in Western Europe now. We know those who had survived to reach Jerusalem were treated as heroes. Examples we've seen of this include Robert of Flanders. He was nicknamed Hero Soliminitus by citizens thanks to his exploits. Another source of evidence we have of this is Godfrey of Bouillon. He became legendary, even within a few years of his death.
Thank you for that informative report. We've seen how it's affected Western Europe, but now let's head over to the Byzantine Empire territory.
Thank you for the intro. So, here we are reporting live, and I can tell you the establishment of the Crusader states in the help eased Seljuk pressure on the Byzantine Empire, which had regained some of its Anatolian territory with Crusaders' help, and experienced a period of relative peace and prosperity in the 12th century. The effect on the Muslim dynasties of the East was gradual but important. In the wake of the death of Malik Shah I in 1092, the political instability and the division of Great Seljuk that had pressured the Byzantine call for aid to the Pope meant that it had prevented a coherent defense against aggressive and expansionist Latin states. Cooperation between them remained difficult for many decades, but from Egypt to Syria to Baghdad, there were calls for the expulsion of the Crusaders, culminating in the recapture of Jerusalem under Saladin later in the century when the Ayyubids had united the surrounding areas.
This crusade was launched in 1095 in a climate of intense religious enthusiasm in Europe, but its success was owed to far more than a religious need to defend Christendom in the East, and eventually to seize the whole holy city of Jerusalem. The Catholic Church has already apologized for a number of misdeeds, such as the Spanish Inquisition, but not for the Crusades. The First Crusade, according to conservative author Robert Spencer, was a defensive movement that was long needed.